Chapter 12, The Invisible Man. In Po, the art of hiding, in Po, was an integral part of the ninja's skills. He took advantage of every possible object, natural as well as man-made, to conceal himself from the enemy. In fact, his ability to hide himself so completely was what gave rise to the legends that ninja can make themselves invisible at will. He would blend in with and become part of a tree, stone lantern, wall, fence, or hedge. Since he was a master at controlled breathing techniques, he was able to remain motionless for long periods of time. At a time. He was able to remain motionless for long periods at a time. I'll look at the camera. He also covered his face and closed his eyes, concentrating on hearing. Uzura Gakure no Jitsu involved hiding like a quail, Uzura, in small gaps between two larger objects, such as the gap between two trees, a rock and grass, a tree and a rock, etc. The ninja would bend over double, making himself into a squarish object. He could assume a rectangular shape by standing erect with his legs together, arms at his sides, and his head bent down onto his chest. Depending on the size and shape of the gap to be filled, he would convert himself into that particular shape. Another technique noted by Okuse called for the ninja to hide in grass or bushes, not on windy days when sound carries further. He was also careful not to walk on dry leaves. There was even a technique for hiding in the shadows of trees, garden stones, stone lanterns, etc. At the same time, he was careful not to look out a window with the light at his back when sneaking around an enemy villa. Tanuki Gokure no Jitsu referred to raccoons and meant that ninja should be able to climb a tree like a raccoon and press himself as close as possible to the trunk or a thick branch so that he should seem part of the tree. Kitsune Gokure no Jitsu was imitating the actions of a fox and hiding himself in water. The ninja covered his face with duckweed or reeds and, if necessary, sank below the surface and breathed through a reed. In Shiba Gokure no Jitsu, the ninja made use of piled up objects such as lumber, charcoal bags, straw rice sacks, etc. He simply hid himself among these objects so that it would be virtually impossible to detect him at a casual glance. Of course, he would usually bury himself out of sight among the objects piled up. When an emergency arose and he had to conceal himself in a hurry, the ninja sometimes jumped into an empty cask, box, or straw bag, but such hiding places were too obvious if his presence were known and he were being chased. He also hid himself in empty chests so that the enemy would unwittingly carry him deep into a castle. When hiding under corridors or passageways, the ninja camouflaged his head and part of his body with bamboo branches and leaves. But when the ninja hid under floors or in attics, he had to be on alert for probing swords and spears. Many suspicious samurai in those days made it a routine practice when they entered a room for the first time to jab their swords and spears through the tatami floor or into a ceiling to check for eavesdropping ninja concealed there. When a sword blade came whistling past his nose or through part of his clothing, the ninja had to remain absolutely still so as not to give himself away. Of course, if the blade cut through his flesh, the blood on the steel would betray his presence, even if he clenched his teeth and didn't cry out. Movie makers are fond of showing a samurai jabbing a spear into the ceiling and then a few seconds later have blood dripping down. Tonpo, or escape techniques, were vital to the success of any mission since capture could possibly undo everything. And like every other phase of ninja activity, nothing was overlooked that might assist him. He made the most of atmospheric conditions, for example, in which to escape. Blinding sunlight, deceptive moonlight, thunder, lightning, wind, clouds, rain, and even snow. The old trick of using a mirror to reflect the sunlight into the enemy's eyes in order to temporarily blind him was included among the ninja's many ruses. Moonlight created an endless variety of shadows on which the ninja could hide long enough during his escape to throw off his pursuers. fresh, falling snow quickly obliterated his tracks. Heavy rain not only discouraged pursuit, but also covered the sight and sound of his escape. Wild clouds passing across the moon would plunge the surrounding scene into sudden darkness and allow the ninja to elude the enemy. Chiton Jitsu, according to Okuse, provided the ninja with the use of water, fire, wood, earth, and metal to aid his escape. When available, hot water could be thrown in a pursuer's face as a blinder, or water could be tossed on a fire so that the resultant explosion would startle the enemy and the steam would provide cover for a few precious seconds, allowing him to disappear. Even the sound of water was used. A ninja hiding near a castle moat, a pond, or river would throw a stone into the water as far away from his position as possible in order to attract the attention of his pursuers toward that direction. Fire was also used to the ninja in escaping. Suddenly, stirring up a fire could throw up sparks, and flames would dazzle the enemy, or a piece of burning wood could either be thrown at him or wielded as a weapon. A sudden bright light in the darkness, produced by one of the ninja's flashing bombs, could momentarily blind a pursuer. In a field, the ninja could set fire to the grass, provided the wind was blowing toward the enemy. If not, he could always circle around to the windward side of his pursuers, as in the case of water. Pursuers, period. As in the case of water, and the ninja also made use of sounds from fire. For example, he would throw some chestnuts or pieces of bamboo into a fireplace or bonfire so that when they burned, they would explode in a loud popping like the sound like a gun, like a sorry. For example, he would throw some chestnuts or pieces of bamboo into a fireplace or bonfire so that when they burned, they would explode in a loud popping sound like a gun, sending the enemy scurrying for cover in the belief it was being fired upon. Smoke, of course, provided the best screen for movements of an escaping ninja. Realizing that a fire was not always handy, he usually carried his own smoke grenades and flash bombs for emergency use. Wood was helpful too, although to a lesser extent. Chips of wood or bamboo were used as blinders and thrown into the eyes of an adversary. A piece of wood could also be thrown into a distant bush to distract the ninja's pursuers, and as a last resort, a heavy stick could be used like a club for clobbering his enemy on the head, or a long pointed stick would be helpful in keeping a pursuer at bay by jabbing at him when no other weapon was available. Using the earth to his advantage involved throwing dirt or sand into a pursuer's eyes as a blinder, crashing a big rock over his head, or using pebbles and rocks to distract the enemy's attention during a search for an escaping ninja. The ninja also dug holes in advance and then retraced his steps over the same trail during his escape so that he could use the camouflaged hole to hide in or to entrap his unsuspecting enemy. There is a cat hair in my tea. Sorry, I get distracted by cat hair in my tea. In a more intricate stratagem, the ninja would dig 2 holes 7 or 8 feet deep and a few feet apart, connected at the bottom to allow a fuse to pass between the 2 holes. The front hole would contain explosives and would be perfectly camouflaged. Then, when he was being pursued, the ninja would leap into the second hole and light the fuse so that as his pursuers ran toward him, they would plunge unexpectedly into the front hole and second later be blown sky high by the explosives. A sharp distraction. The ninja used metal in much the same way as the other 4 elements. Of course, he always carried a supply of multi-pointed shuriken for throwing at the enemy, more to distract him or force him to dodge the attack than to seriously wound him, although a well-aimed shuriken striking a sword-wielding adversary on his hand or arm could temporarily put him out of action. And if it hit him in the eye, it could actually do irreparable damage. Spiked tetsubishi, or caltrops, were another ninja favorite for delaying pursuers during an escape. He strewed his line of retreat with them so that when an enemy stepped on one, it was usually enough to make him give up the chase. They were designed so that no matter how they landed, one metal spike always pointed upward and could easily pierce the thickest sandal or tabi. If no shuriken or tetsubishi were available, the ninja used metal coins instead of a blinder. Metal statues or large metal vases and other heavy metal objects could also be turned to the ninja's favor, either as weapons or obstacles. For instance, a heavy bronze statue could be pushed over onto the group of pursuers, or a metal vase could be rolled down the stairs being climbed by the enemy. Metal candlestick holders made potent weapons too. A small metal coin or similar metallic object, when thrown against a stone, made a clinking sound that served to distract the enemy hunting for a hidden ninja. Making a big hullabaloo sometimes helped the ninja escape. He might make it all the way to the main gate or guardhouse without being discovered, but had to devise some way of outwitting his enemy there to complete his escape. Thus, he would rush up to the guards on duty, and in an excited voice describe a big accident that he claimed had just occurred inside the castle or villa. Constantly looking back and pointing toward the supposed scene of the accident, he would use all of his dramatic technique to convince the guards of the authenticity of the mishap and do his best to get them excited too. Then, in the midst of all this hullabaloo, he would calmly walk out through the main gate, shouting back a final word of warning to be careful. One of the wittiest stratagems employed by the ninja in making good his escape was his use of various small animals and insects. Snakes, spiders, centipedes, rats, toads, foxes, monkeys, raccoons, dogs, etc. Chased by guards in a castle or villa, a ninja might pull a snake or scorpion out of his pocket and toss it at his pursuers, startling them for an instant. An instant was all the ninja needed to escape. Even the age-old trick of suddenly stopping and forcing his closely pursuing enemy to fall over him was used by the quick-thinking ninja. He would then jump up and quickly run back the way he had just come to confuse the enemy. He also used dogs and monkeys to attack and bite the enemy. Oh, isn't that nice? When he slipped into an enemy camp, he kept his dog outside, waiting for his return. When the ninja was escaping, he then set his dog on the pursuers, delaying them long enough to make good his escape. Dog little guy.